All right, test, test, test. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining in. Today, we're going to just do a quick rundown of Sky Temple. And if you're familiar with Whose Line Is It Anyway, it's a very funny show, but something simple where it says, it's like they go into play and they get all the upvotes, but the points don't matter. And same way when I think about Sky Temple, everything is made up and only the buildings matter. So Sky Temple is actually one of the maps that I really dislike. It doesn't really fit with what I like. I like comebacks. I like taking big fights, and I like having a lot of interaction. And Sky Temple tends to actually favor not doing action. Especially once you get ahead, the best thing to do is to just trade and not be proactive, and so it's not fun. So some other reasons why I don't like Sky Temple, it can feel very snowbally. Like if you happen to lose one fight, the enemy team that's ahead can pretty much make it to where you're forced to fight over the boss, or you just lose. So kind of why that's mentioned there. That's the only comeback mechanic on the map. To keep your advantage, sometimes the best thing to do is to trade temples or just be neutral, which is kind of boring. The map can be played in multiple ways, which makes it difficult from the drafting perspective, because if you really want a team fight and they just decide to be super macro-y, then you may be in a problem. The objective is very strong. It's probably the strongest objective, and so the fact that it is so strong can be very sad when your team decides not to come to it in Storm League. So, and then buildings matter more than anything else. It doesn't matter how many kills you get. If you knock down the buildings, the temple shots are worth more. It gives you more value. So, kind of continuing on from the side of the pros. So back in HGC, when Cavalier Guest took a bunch of notes and put a bunch of stuff together for this one, he would talked about how when you're ahead on structures, you can just play conservatively. The enemy team has to find you and kill you and punish you somehow to come back on the map. So you don't want late game heroes. You just want to get ahead and sit on your lead to the rest of the game and play very slow and careful. Once again, I don't like that, but it is very good words of wisdom on how to actually play this map. So let's quickly talk about the objective, just in case you've not known some of these key details about the objective. You stand on the point, it shoots at the structures. The temples shoot at the lane they're closest to first. Because of that, you want to add some bonus siege damage to those structures, walls, and buildings of the temples as you're capturing them. So that way, when you go to hit the buildings, the shots potentially get more into the fort rather than just into the wall and the well. It always goes closest fort, next lane fort, then keep. So you want to make sure that you're knocking and chipping away at those buildings. Any damage you get to a building gets you closer to the core. And lastly, one temple can actually kill the core all by itself if the core is the only structure that's left. And so that's what really makes this objective so strong. The objective shrines, or the capture points, always spawn the same. The first three are always the same. It's mid and top, and then on round one, and then bottom for round two. So make sure you plan for it. Some of the basics of the map, besides wave timings, making sure that you catch all the waves and all the soak, you want to make sure you're prioritizing your win condition. So if you are a very team fighty, invading type of comp, you want to make sure that you are on top of your soak, but also be faster at clearing than the enemy team. The faster your waves are cleared, the quicker you can do something, whether it's an invade, a gank attempt, stealing their camps, something like that. So people tend to ask, what's the most important lane on this map? Well, it depends. Normally I would say bottom, just because you've got two camps and the boss walk through bottom. So if you need a win condition, that boss can definitely help you end through bottom. But since the objective wins on its own, the lanes really don't matter as far as a priority. You just need to knock buildings down, and the objective will win for you. The other thing to watch out for and not neglect, people tend to focus that bottom really hard. If you get an early bruiser and you win top shrine, you most likely, or top temple, sorry, you will most likely knock down that fort. Meaning that the next time top is open, if you were to grab both bruisers and push top, that's a lot of damage, and you can potentially win with that. You don't necessarily need a boss. There's 4 camps total on the map. 2 knights, 2 easy siege camps, 1 on each side. And then obviously there's a boss. That's incorrect. Let me fix that real quick. There's a boss near the bottom. Boss near the bottom. Sorry about that. And then obviously the boss, aka the throw pit. So the boss is the comeback mechanic on the map, but honestly, it's the highest risk for the lowest reward as far as what it actually is capable of doing. So when we're talking about drafting on Sky Temple, a lot of the time you want to make sure you do draft boss control. Globals are huge if you're able to get around the map and fight in multiple temples or pick off structures or invades. Being able to be in 2 places at once with a global is huge. People that hit structures and do mercs, you need those. Like I talked about before, everything about hitting the buildings is more important than kills a lot of the time. If you use the kills to hit the buildings, though, that's worth it. But you need to be able to hit buildings. Early game heroes are really strong on this map. A lot of people pick up stuff like Kerrigan and other just aggressive heroes in that pick type of composition, just to make sure that they are able to take advantage of that. Sustained healers tend to do pretty good because you're going to have to like stand on the point for a while. You don't necessarily need a sustained healer, but it's probably better than having just an Uther with a burst heal trying to hold people for temples. Good wave clear is needed, just that way, as always, make sure your waves are cleared and you catch all the soak. Vision is good, as well as good rotations. A lot of the pros back in the day used to pick up Genji quite often, just because he would interrupt rotations, he'd be super annoying, and he can get to the temples quickly. So popular heroes, special credit to Ishbu here. I literally just snipped this because I loved all the heroes that he put on here. The heroes you tend to see on this map are heavy siegers and globals. So you've got Sylvanas, Greymane, Hammer, and Anubarak. Anubarak's one of the few tanks that can actually spawn beetles, which absorb shots, which means that you can siege buildings easier with him. Sylvanas shuts down structures. Greymane's one of the best siegers in the game, camp takers in the game. Sergeant Hammer just sits in a lane and pushes buildings. That's super annoying. If your team's not ready for it, it may be a game breaker. Globals are huge. As you can see, Dahaka, very strong right now in the meta as of November 20th of 2021. Falstead, really good as well for Gust, not just for his global. And another global that's not on there would be ETC. So making sure that you're able to grab the cow as your global tank if you need it. Split pushing is very strong. Like I said, you can do a very macro-oriented style if you need to. And if you end up grabbing stuff like Samuro or Vikings or even Zagara, you can do a very effective, essentially not fighting style. So you may not want to just pick one from everything on the list here, but making sure that your win condition fits what you're looking for. And then, of course, the special consideration you always have to think about on this map is Abathur. So Abathur is a pain because he's one of the only character that still has Mule. If you're unfamiliar with the talent, it's at level 7. Abathur can heal structures. And so since we were talking about how structures are the key to Sky Temple, having someone that essentially nullifies this powerful objective or slows it down can be very powerful. Abathur tends to just be flat out banned in almost every pro game, just because people don't want to have to deal with him, as well as his ability to negate objectives. So those are popular things to watch and consider for. So I just saw you in there. Welcome. How are you doing this evening, Mr. Trench?
Super duper.
Awesome. So I'll keep going. Feel free to tag me at any time if you need anything else, or if you have a question. So when drafting for the map, you also want to make sure you have boss control. So boss control doesn't necessarily need to be the same 5 heroes every time. Obviously, you're looking to deny boss. Having vision of it is huge, as well as being able to steal or punish them for clumping on the point. So people tend to pick Falstad, May, Junkrat, Tyrael, Zagara, Zarya. There's tons. Zeratul. The big thing with all of these different boss control heroes is you want to be able to take the boss on your terms, deny them from the boss, or use an ultimate that essentially steals the boss away, Falstead's always the most classic one, just because at level 20 he gets the Mighty Gust that essentially stops people from moving for 5 seconds over that duration, and so you'll be able to just steal the boss from them if you do not know where Falstead is. Similarly, May and Tyrael and Junkrat and all of them have ways to deny the boss. So just think about that in your drafts, especially since most games, unless the enemy team poorly plays it, you will eventually have a boss. It's not like you'll win without boss. So just making sure that you have an answer for boss. The biggest thing for Sky Temple, because it's such an early game focused map, you need to have the first 2 minutes of your game plan ironed out. I honestly could say the same thing for every map. I've heard from many great coaches that your team should practice essentially the first 2 minute drill. You go through and you essentially do your rotations, do your camps, figure out where everybody is at on the page, throw your abilities, and just keep practicing that first 2 minute drill. If you think about it like basketball or soccer or any other sport, you practice your free throws, you practice your inbounds, you practice your corner kicks, you practice doing penalty kicks. You make sure that you get the rhythm down to where it becomes automatic. This is my job. This is what I do. And for Sky Temple, you need it even more so. So typical first 2 minutes tends to look like those bullet points there, where you start kind of 1-4 with the off lane catching top soak above the eye. You don't necessarily need to fight for that vision eye. You can, but I think that if you don't, you can potentially get a rotational advantage over your enemies as long as your whoever's your off laner doesn't die top. So you have the 4-man clear mid, and then immediately the 4-man clears bottom. And then as soon as that's done, the 4-man runs back up and clears mid. And then you have, about that time, at 1 minute, the camp is up that for both teams, as well as bottom wave needs to be soaked. So people tend to split and do both at the same time. They'll send like the healer and the camper to do that, one person to soak bottom, and then the tank will kind of just like ward in the bush and or catch mid for soak. So if, depending on your team's composition or win condition, you might be able to quickly do that camp. Like if you guys took like a Karazim or a Rhaegar, you can quickly do that camp and then go invade theirs. And then you get 2 camps, and it's XP denial and you get building damage, especially in that bottom lane. If you're prioritizing that bottom lane for boss as well as the second phase of temple shots, stealing their camp can be really big. On the other hand, you don't have to invade if that's not your comp, that's not your strategy. You can just get the camps and then immediately go up for bruisers, because bruisers spawn in a minute 30. And then you can push top with the bruisers really quickly if you want to and try and siege for the first objective. That's what's kind of nuts, is that there's a lot of choices and there's a lot of things you can do differently in an attempt to mess or throw off your opponent's groove. In the same way, if you wait on your bruisers, you can take your bruisers while one of the bottom temple is up. So then they have to choose, are we going to fight for the bottom temple at 10 minutes, or am I going to match bruisers? So as you're going back and forth, you need to be able to have your win condition in mind and pretty much pick the temple that's right for you. If you're planning on taking the early bruisers and sieging with them, make sure you siege with them. Maybe swap your offlaner to catch soak in the bottom and mid while the 4-man pushes top with the bruisers. If you take out that wall and then you win the top temple, you pretty much get that whole fort for free if you win the top temple. And then that creates more opportunities, whether it be invading their bruisers or just less safety for them around the eye and the vision there. So make sure that you're always doing that. And to enable that, make sure you have good camp clear and wave clear. So this might seem silly, but it's like, what do you do if you're ahead? So you, your first 2 minutes, you did good. You took the bruisers. You guys did top temple. You know, the enemy team did the consolation prize and took mid temple. And after all of those were done, you got the top fort. So now you're ahead. And it's like, what do we want to do? Well, as funny as it sounds, you don't want to essentially fight them. You really just want to only do things when you're way ahead. So if you're up a talent tier, feel free to invade on their camp. If you're up a talent tier, feel free to take a fight on the objective or something that's there. But if you're not up that much, don't fight. Just go even. Play conservative. Because if you overextend and you're like, oh, we're winning, we're just going to run them over, and then you die, so it's like then they can get the map back in their control, and it becomes very painful to come back on this map unless people make big mistakes. So if you're ahead, don't do the boss. Keep an eye on it, but just don't do it. It's honestly the highest risk for the lowest reward on the map. So, like I mentioned there, Sky Temple is a battle of attrition. The objective will win on its own, just play slow. And that doesn't really make people happy in Storm League. So, if you're behind, you want to be forcing fights. You have to make a change. You have to do something to get your momentum back and to attempt to get the control of the temples or control of the map back in your favor. So, if you force a fight middle on a temple that's all by itself and you get a kill, great. Siege a building. You don't necessarily need to cap that point right now. If you can knock down a building instead, that means that the temple that you won is going to shoot at a more valuable structure. You always want to be hitting buildings. So even if you're behind, you can still take out the bottom fort. And taking out the bottom fort gives you an opportunity for the boss to help you end later because the boss goes bottom. So you want to be able prioritizing that bottom temple, bottom keep, in an attempt to try and force a comeback or a win condition, even though you may be behind. In HUC times, Cavalier Guest had mentioned that it usually takes 2 bosses to come back and win on Sky Temple when you're really far behind. So just be conscious of a comeback on Sky Temple tends to require you being very aggressive and very much so invading, and you got to make stuff happen. The enemy team can passively do nothing and win. So it's kind of sad. It's one of the reasons I don't like this map. So there's multiple ways to play the map. There's, I'll say, the more popular and probably best style is some sort of 4-1 invade kill style, like a pick comp. It doesn't have to be like a death squad running around, but the goal is that you will be fighting and being able to create picks and create opportunities, so that way you can hit buildings, you can merc. You can do something similar, but grab a whole bunch of heroes that are really good at sieging and disengaging. And so you have like a 4-1 where you're merking and doing stuff. So instead of maybe invading their camps and killing them, you're just faster at doing camps and wave clear. And so when they go to match and answer your stuff, you guys are getting more and more an advantage with that Sylvanas or Greymane or Sergeant Hammer. Then there's a macro style where it takes a lot of team coordination. I honestly don't think Storm League can do it. But if you are playing as a team, you can. I have a couple examples of a macro never fight style, and you're always trading. You're always like 1-for-1 on temples, 1-for-1 everywhere you can, and because you know you're not gonna be fighting, your other heroes are more competent at clearing the waves and sieging and stealing stuff, and so they'll be pushing and trying to make opportunities available. So. There's a couple examples with Samro that I'll show in a few minutes for that one. And then, of course, always watch out for Abathur. Abathur, like I said, he heals buildings. He manages to change the entire dynamic of how the game's played. If you win a temple and for some reason you don't destroy the building, you have to go commit and get that building or Abathur's going to heal it up. And that's going to be very sad when you work so hard to win the temple and then Abathur healed it back up over time because you never killed it. So here's some recent CCL examples. So this one here is actually from Season 3. We had Granite Gaming versus Chili Mountain. If you can kind of look at it and see what they were drafting or what they were doing. We talked about having high priority on globals, having high priority on boss control. And as you can see, Granite Gaming did both of those things. You've got 2 globals, boss control in Volstead, and you've got a very pick-oriented comp. Right, the idea being that Diablo charges and flips someone, Anduin roots them, and Ming blows them up. And being able to have two globals like this also enables a lot of rotational picks, where they can potentially invade a camp and have Dahaka dig in and create a numbers advantage that they weren't expecting. Chili Mountain, on the other hand, did attempt to do something similar. They picked a lot of heavy rotations. They went for heavy siege with Lunara and Zagara, and then they made quick rotations with Luna, Lucio, and Anubrak. And them three alone can get kills. Like, it's pretty strong, especially if they're managed to pick off one of those globals that are out of position. But one of the problems that this team is going to suffer from is if the game comes down to boss, Zagara, it would have to go Maw. And I'm not sure, I didn't review this game 100% if he went Maw. But if he doesn't go Maw, the next boss control tool is Yrel. And neither one of them can do anything about Mighty Gust. And so this is it. Unfortunately, Granite Gaming has the better boss control between just with Wind Tunnel at level 20. And so if they get ahead with their globals, which it looks like they did, they had 10 more kills than the enemy team, then there's just no way that they're coming back from that one. So another recent CCL example, same idea, but the teams played very differently. So 30K this time around has the only global in Dahaka, but they went for more of a rotational gank style with the Tracer, as well as trying to push early game advantages and shut down buildings with the Sylvanas. They ran into a problem in this one. If you look at like takedowns and stuff, everything's pretty even. Ended up coming down to a boss fight, and Simplicity's Hogger legitimately just controlled the boss so well and did so much damage. It's a really fun game. If you've never seen this one, check it out. The link's there in the PowerPoint, and you can go look it up. But Hogger ends up doing a lot of work here. And so with neither team really having the strongest boss control, it ended up being a lot of trades and back and forth throws. So very fun game. And yeah, Tracer's super annoying. So, and then another one here. So like I said, you always got to watch out for Abathur and Samuro. So Diamond Hand's composition here is actually a great example of a do not fight comp. So Samuro and Abathur are super annoying when paired together, as well as very strong on the map. So Samuro is going to be taking camps, soaking, and finding opportunities to split push all game. Abathur is going to heal your buildings, and both Anubrak, Sylvanas, and Karazim can siege lanes, shut down buildings, and get structure damage. And so their whole game plan, if you watch this game, which again, if you've never watched this one, this is a great example of how to macro Sky Temple, because they don't fight at all. Like, until they don't. It's funny. There's actually a clip, I forget of if it was Lauber or whoever the tank player is for Diamond Hands at the time. He essentially is like, don't fight, don't fight, don't fight. And then they dive under the building, and he's like, okay, now it's time to fight. And they just run in and blow up all 5 of their players as they're trying to siege the keep with a boss. And then they run to core and win. And they're like, see, don't fight, easy game. And it was definitely something that it's super annoying. I hate playing Samuro and Abathur. But it's a very fun game, and you can see what Granite Gaming was trying to do. They went with the more early game aggressive style, right? They drafted boss control. You know, they've got their Tyrael. They've got early game kills between Kerrigan and Stukov. They have some good blinds and other tools for all the AAs that are coming out in Samuro and in Karazim. But the thing is Granite Gaming wants to fight. Diamond Hands don't. So they never fought. And so their comp never really got the value they were hoping for. If you look there, they had 0 kills. They actually did not get a single kill that game, because Diamond Hands essentially just never let them fight. So it's a really fun game. Once again, the link's there. And then going way back to HGC days. So back in 2018, here's a cool game from Genji and Ballistics. Once again, the link and the YouTube VOD is there. And you can see again the Tassadar and Samuro shenanigans. And despite essentially a double support from Ballistics to try and answer what they originally saw was a blow-up comp, especially with the Muradin and Seven Sided from Sake on Monk. They they just got ran over global macro wise. Hooligan did go stage dive ETC, which was really cool to see. So fun game, check it out. But the big thing again on this one is that Abathur and Samuro combination with of course Rich and Kyocha, some of the best players in the world here on this team life for Genji. Really fun. All right, I got a last little bit that I'm going to show off with some Mad Buddah examples of the map. But before I do that, anything from you, Trench, or anyone else in the audience there?
No, sir.
Okay, no worries. So, on Sky Temple, like I said, most of the time you load in and you will have your typical 4-1 type of composition where folks will be controlling and fighting for some of the early game soak, and then the priority comes down to their ability to macro and camp things. So, just throwing out some random heroes on the board here, but just kind of walking through what exactly is our first 2 minutes, right? Like we want to make sure that we have on lockdown what we want to do for each of the different openings for each of our maps. So on Sky Temple here, blue side here wants to get an early kill if they can. They have 3 CCs between, or 4 CCs even with the Haka. So these guys are a little bit more of a fight-oriented comp versus on the right is a little bit more macro-oriented, especially with Maiev. Yes, can do both, but Maiev can also take Naisha's momentum, which lets them do wave clear really well. You got wave clear and camps on Rehgar. You've got PvE on Lunara and PvE on Malthael. So blue, hopefully, whoops, undo that. Blue hopefully will get an advantage and go ahead and clear this first section here in the middle. And so most teams, like I said, that it's not foolproof, but most teams will essentially do the mid lane first, then they will rotate down as 4 and do the bot lane, and then they will run back up and do the mid lane, and then at this point, that's when they have to break up and choose. And so if I was blue team, I would send my Phoenix and Stukov down here to clear, probably put KT down here to quickly wave clear the camps with his long range Q and W, and then a new Brack would be either posted kind of here watching the invade or just catching the mid soak while Dahaka and Malthael are up here like slapping each other in the top lane. And so once this camp is done, these guys won't out camp this team here, especially with Rehgar and Maiev. But if this camp happens to be completed first, say it's like you guys can look to potentially invade their camp down here with all of the CC and all of the choke that you guys want to fight in. This team, blue team, wants to fight, and if they can find opportunities to do so between their CC stun chain and burst, they can, kill these heroes. Muradin might be a little bit difficult just because he can jump, but that's why you got Stukov. Stukov shuts down pretty much everyone. So once you go through and you're doing that, so I guess I'll call this D, just that way they happen at the same time. Actually, I can call it C. But yeah, so I said you've got. So once the rotations for the first, like all of this is the first minute and like 15 seconds, is 3 waves and a camp. So then your team needs to make a decision on what do we want to do from here. Are we going to play more macro towards winning top? Like I said, the Bruiser camp comes out from here and can push into this top building. If you manage to take out 1.5 of the wall here, or even the full wall, this top temple will shoot right at this fort, and it will kill it. And you'll be able to take out the whole top building because you supported and pushed with this camp. If you look at our composition, we're not really great at sieging, per se. Right? Like, sure, we can hit buildings, but none of these people are, when left alone, are going to get the building by themselves. A new Brack enables sieging, and sure, Phoenix can hit the building, but none of these people are necessarily strong siegers. Versus if I had to say Lunara is a strong sieger, Rehgar is a strong sieger by himself. Malthael can't hit buildings, but he can cover the soak. So if I was red team, as soon as this camp has been taken, I'll switch the colors just so that way we're talking about two different teams. If I was red team, I would, as soon as this camp is done, I would rush for this one and call Malthael to come down and cover my 2 lanes as a double soak while we do that. Just so that way we're able to siege really hard into their composition and see if we can get ahead. Sure, these 3 people can take this bruiser camp, but they're not necessarily really fast at it. Red team is very fast. And so if red team can get this camp out first, they probably can get some early siege damage on this wall and be able to make plays happen. Because they're not necessarily wanting to fight as hard, something they need to be aware of is controlling not only the vision here, but also this rotation. Because if blue manages to find a good dig in with a Nubrak or find an angle on this end with a Stukov silence, Dahaka can dig in and get behind them and punish them for committing all of these resources up here. And so, Malthael's doing his best to double soak these 2 lanes here while the 4-man's pushing. So that way you're not missing soak. But you need to make sure that whatever your 2-minute drill or 2-minute comp is going to be, that you get value for what you're trying to do. Because, like I said, blue team wants to fight and kill things. So if they can find Malthael by himself rotating, right, and we can leave, just Phoenix up here or leave Phoenix and Dahaka up here to clear, and we still have KT, Stukov, and a Nubrak roaming around for kills, that's great. We'll be able to pick off that Malthael by himself. So once the first 2 temples are done, pretty much the next temple, I'll reset all the lines. The next temple is always bottom. So you want to make sure that you have a game plan for what you want to do for the bottom temple. Most teams will typically hit 10 right at the bottom temple as well, if they've caught their soak and done their stuff well. So this tends to be the make or break definition of what's going to happen. If you get to temple first and can at least get the shots as 10, you can probably get a quarter to half the shots for free if you manage to get here first and you are 10s first. The biggest issue with this temple is obviously there's 2 chokes on each side. And so if your whole team is inside the temple, you're not going to be able to leave if the enemy team collapses. So you most likely want to take the fight where it's advantageous, or if you're a macro comp and you're like, we really don't want a team fight, right? Send your split pushers to push up all day. This is actually really favorable for blue, because even if Malthael's on a pale horse, he can't global. But if blue is, fighting down here in the choke, because they want to take a team fight as soon as they hit 10s, a Nubrak dives in and cocoons Muradin or Maiev or whoever. Probably Lunara. Lunara is pretty annoying. But you cocoon one of those heroes, you've got a kill here between your CC chain and blow up. It's gonna happen. And if Malthael is up here top answering a camp, because blue team said, hey, we're gonna hold our camp until the temple's up. So now Malthael's stuck up here holding the camp. Dahaka can dig in and make this a 5v4. And all of that, honestly, needs to come down at the beginning of the game. What is our timing? What is our plan? And yeah, it's a fun map in the fact that you can plan out and have all these strategies, but it's really unfun because, let's say blue team's strategy, like I said, was we're going to 5-man collapse down here and get kills. They 5-man fight down here, and they clump too hard, and Maiev gets a million resets, and Malthael manages to finally come down, and he last rites on top of a Nubrak, and Maiev tethers KT, and KT dies. So now we're behind. They won the temple, they won the team fight, we're just flat out behind. And now it comes down to, how are we going to win this? What are we going to do? And kind of like I talked about in the overview, the only real comeback mechanic on this map is boss. And so if you're trying to come back on this map for the boss and you're blue team, your only boss control tool, you've got Cocoon in Nubrak for a boss control tool, and you've got Flailing Swipes from Stukov. And the enemy team for red doesn't really have a boss control tool. And so the boss might be favorable for you. The one thing that's going to be difficult is obviously my Ev cage. Like when everyone goes to pile in, my Ev can drop the cage, and as much as you don't want to be in the cage, like, well, you have to make a choice. Are we going to fight on the point or are we not? And so I think blue actually has a very good chance at being able to secure a boss. You just need to be careful of living, because if you engage hard on this boss here, you will have an issue trying to get out from the last rites, as well as I don't know if we go meme beam here or not, but anytime my Ev cages, you could just beam as Phoenix and be able to help like secure this point. So boss is going to be their attempt at coming back and making a chance for this game if they get behind in kills. So you always, like I said, that's what you want to do. But if you're ahead, red never has to take the boss. Red can just trade temples. Like, oh, there's a temple bottom and top. Okay, we'll take the bottom one just to make sure that you don't do boss. Because if you do the top temple, you're so far away you won't know if they're doing boss or not. And blue doesn't have any vision tools, so they could potentially sneak boss. Versus Lunara can drop a wisp and just put a wisp, just put a wisp here in the bush, and it has full rotation view, or here. And now they know if they're doing boss as well as if they're going to get invaded, and it allows Malthael to soak things, and the three of them can come down here. So red will attempt to out macro this team, and blue will try to force some kills. And if red stays ahead, they can just win through the temples. And I don't know. I hate that. I wish that the team fight and the other stuff mattered more. But you can truly just out macro on this one. And so once you kind of get that first 2 minutes in the first, I guess 3 temples, it's only 2 temple phases, but once you get the first 3 temples down, Sky Temple becomes kind of on autopilot. Because you're going to say, is there a camp up to take? Yes. Okay. Is there a camp up to invade because I'm ahead? No. Okay. Will I just get soak? Or can I hit a building? So it's not, I don't know. It's very hard to find a comeback, and if you didn't necessarily draft for it or plan for it, it just becomes kind of miserable. The one thing to note as well, kind of I talked about earlier, how you can prep and get potentially this whole fort if you push with bruisers and try and get that early. So once these 2 temples are done, this camp will most likely be back up for both teams. And so if you're able, as the 4-man, swap the bruiser back up, if you can take this camp and siege this wall and get there well, now it's even harder for them to contest this bottom point. And so that's kind of like checkmate number 2, is you want to, like, if you won top, or even if you didn't win top, as soon as the whole, like, 2 temples are done, you want to be getting this camp on timer and trying to get this well. So that way they can't fight you on the 10v10 fight. They have no wall to run to, and they have no well to tap and to come back and fight. So, yeah. And then after that, I don't know if the temples are truly random, but definitely some of the temple locations don't seem to consistently show, unlike these first 3. The next temple, I feel like, tends to be top and bottom. And that's why people end up playing for boss and looking for this bottom temple again. But it's not always consistent. So, I'm also, if I'm wrong on that, feel free to comment on the YouTube or wherever on that one and let me know that I'm an idiot. But that's okay. Yeah, that's Sky Temple in a nutshell. And hopefully, as we've kind of talked through it, we've given you some new ideas, some new ways to potentially play the map, as well as thinking about what heroes and what tools you're bringing to this map. I would say in a coordinated environment, there's a lot more you can do in a more Storm League-ish type of thing. I would just make sure that you bring a hero that can do multiple things. Boss control being one of them. Because, like, I know that a global and something like Falstad is probably going to be really, really strong on this map, just because you can make the plays, you can save the boss, you can fly in when it makes sense to assist and aid your team. If you go... I don't think you want to go lightning build specifically, but if for some reason you're not getting any heals or support, you could go lightning shield and you could tank this all by yourself and not even get low, just because the way that the lightning shield works. So, but yeah, just making sure that you bring a good gust tool, another really strong hero on the map, would be like Greymane or Sylvanas. They can do camps, they can siege things fairly well. I would probably, from the tank slot, look to be playing either ETC or a Nubrak, just because they can add to siege. ETC has a global, so I can pivot into stage dive. If we're going for an early game type of pick comp thing, I would love to see like a Varian or a Kerrigan type of stuff. But yeah, that's really all I got for Sky Temple. Anything out there from the audience? Anything you want to know about Trench?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
When does boss become a priority rather than a win more mechanic? It seems like, generally speaking, the right answer is if you're winning, to not really go to the boss, is to push structures because of how strong the objective is. But the losing team can maybe consider it as something they can do. Is there ever a time where boss becomes a priority?
It's only for the losing team, just like you mentioned. Um, so that, yeah, it really is only a losing team metric. Because, like, if the winning team. Oh, so let's say you kill 3 of their players, right? And so if it's like, if red team kills 3 players, and there's only, we'll say, Stukov and KT left. If those are the only heroes left on their team, which red can burn down this boss. So it's like, and remove it from the map if they happen to be on like this side of the map. So it's like, but if they kill 3 players off of this like level 10 fight here, and and the building's still up, I would take the building first. Like boss will not get this building or this stuff by itself. Um, like I said, I'm like bosses. Unfortunately, I think you described it well. It's a win more or a comeback, because really, what you want to happen at boss is you don't really want the boss, like you want it, but like you want to get kills at the boss, which makes the boss push even stronger, or you want to push with the boss because the troll NATO that it casts is super strong. So, um, like I said, the boss doesn't spawn until 5 minutes, and so it's something where you can't really like cheese the boss or anything to like get an advantage anywhere, because like the boss is usually up at the same time that you're gonna start rotating down to this bottom temple. So yeah, I don't. Hopefully that helps. Like I said, it's not really great because you're like, oh yeah, I want to take the boss and I want to do stuff that's advantageous, but the temples just are guaranteed structure damage, and the boss is potential structure damage. Like, like I, if you took the boss and the enemy team decided we're not even going to clear the boss, we're going to fight you at this temple, and they end up 5-man killing you or killing several people because you were weak from taking this boss, this will do more damage to your structures than the boss that they're blatantly ignoring will do to this bottom building. So it's really sad. Or they can put one person on there to clear boss. So it's just not strong enough. If you think about like Cursed Hollow, like Cursed Hollow, actually the bosses tend to win you the game more often than in most other win conditions. Sure, you get curses and it shuts down buildings and stuff, but typically what ends the game is the boss. On Sky Temple, you could play the whole game with never fighting a boss. Especially if you're ahead, you just get all of the temples and you just keep shooting things down, and then you kill them. When the blue team tries to go to the boss because it's their only hope, you kill them at boss and you steal the boss and then you go win. So yeah, it tends to be a throw pit or a trap. So anything else you got on that one? Or any other questions?
No, that's perfect. Sounds like Tower of Doom Boss 2.0. So, thank you.
Yeah, definitely on towers that could be a little bit of a bait where it's like I go and fight and took the boss, and it's like that's cool. We just wiped you after you got the boss's 4 shots, and now you're 6 capped, and you lose. So awesome. Well, thanks for listening in, checking in, and thanks to all those that'll catch us up on YouTube. If you have any questions, feel free to message me. I'll do my best to answer them. Once again, I'm not, a master player or anything super awesome. Just hopefully this gives you some new fundamentals, some new tools to try and play Sky Temple a little bit better. Help you get that win percentage up, and just practice that 2-minute drill so that way you know what you want to do and what your win condition is for Sky Temple. All right, have a great one. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Catch you later.